And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for the evening, Miss Nancy A. Sheehan, the Journey North Program Coordinator at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Arboretum. She has worked at the intersection of science and community outreach for more than 3 decades. She believes in the collective power of individuals working together to create change for the good, and to this day remains passionate about volunteerism and participatory science and research. Before assuming this leadership position with Journey North in 2018, Ms. Sheehan managed a volunteer-based water quality monitoring program with a nonprofit organization in southeastern Wisconsin. She also worked with various districts to develop participatory science projects geared toward engaging middle and high school students. After receiving her master's from Yale School of the Environment, Ms. Sheehan served as a forestry extension volunteer with the Peace Corps in Gambia. She then pursued graduate studies at the Wisconsin-Madison Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and led teams conducting participatory land tenure research in West Africa. Beyond her professional endeavors, Ms. Sheehan enjoys kayaking and backpacking. A native of Washington, D.C., Ms. Sheehan has lived in Madison, Wisconsin for 25 years while maintaining strong ties to her family's coastal roots in North Carolina. All right, Nancy, the floor is all yours.
Great. Well, thanks, Luke, and welcome everybody. Nice to virtually meet you all. And I was saying to Luke earlier, I wish that this could be an in-person presentation, because here in Madison, Wisconsin, we are having snowstorms. And I bet you are not having snowstorms yet in North Carolina. So before I start, I would love if you all can turn to your chat box down there in the menu and just let me know if you have actually heard of Journey North before, and perhaps if you've actually submitted an observational report to Journey North. I would love to see who's out there and if you've heard of Journey North. So I'll give you just a few minutes to just put a couple notes there in the chat box. And I see at least one person, this will be news to them, so that's all good. Great. And while those are rolling in, I think I will go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully this will be, if you've heard of Journey North before, new information. And if you have not, even better, because there's lots to hear, unpack, and share with you all. So I am sharing my screen. Everybody seeing it? Way to go. Good. Yes.
Looks good to me.
Great, great. Okay, so I'm hoping that this is more of an invitation to all of you on this web conference call today to help track wildlife migration with Journey North. So we don't have a lot of time together, so I have trying to keep to a few talking points. I'm going to cover our mission and vision, the importance of monitoring wildlife migration, some of Journey North's program features and key projects, and I will do a review of the monitoring methods very briefly through giving some examples. So our mission is to ignite interest, raise awareness, and advance the science of wildlife migration. And our vision is we have this envision a future where migratory species move freely along migratory routes, supported by strong conservation efforts and participatory research. So I put the vision in always in these presentations because I want to have people think beyond just the particular individual migratory species that might appear in your backyard. We really want to see the journey of these migratory species continue into the future. So it's their journey from their breeding territory to their overwintering territory and then a return. So that is our vision for the future. And the next couple slides are kind of my downer slides, unfortunately, but we'll get to the more hopeful slides in a moment. Some of you may already have seen the report that came out in Science in 2019. That really was a clarion call of the kind of risks our migratory birds and insects are facing. This couple of these stats up there. The study showed that there's been a 28% population loss of migratory bird species. The aerial insectivores have been even harder hit. There's a 32% population loss, and that's since 1970. I put some little stats here for some of the more commonly seen migratory birds. So the Baltimore Oriole, it's been estimated 2 and 5 have been lost since 1970. The barn swallow, 2 and 5 also. Rufous hummingbirds, which are more prevalent east of the Rockies, but are also in North Carolina. There's been a 60% decrease since 74. And red-winged blackbird, which is ubiquitous in the Great Lakes region here in Wisconsin and Minnesota and beyond. There's, you think it's very common. There's actually been a 30% decrease in a study that was conducted between 1966 and 2014. Insect populations are also on the decline. And I don't know if many of you heard this, but there was a recent assessment of the overwintering monarch butterfly population in Mexico. Found that there was a 59% decline in the population numbers from 23 to 24. So these species are in trouble. And as I mentioned, the fact that these migratory species have to take these journeys, they don't do it just because they want to be in warmer climates like me in the winter months, but they need to be able to travel to where the resources are that they need at different seasons of the year. There are a lot of risks that they encounter during those journeys: human obstructions, habitat loss, predation, extreme weather events, and climate change, of course. And there are so many, we could spend all evening today talking about some of the specific actions that we can all do. So those risks that I mentioned in the previous slide are human-induced risks, our buildings, the lighting of our urban areas in the evening. They're all human-made risks. And so we're part of the problem, but we can really be part of the solution. So there's some very simple things that we can all start doing. Avoid pesticides, plant native plants, prevent window collision by putting the decals on windows, turn your lights off in the evening, especially during migratory seasons. Keep cats indoors. I'm an indoor cat, much to his chagrin. Plant shade-grown coffee, eat or drink shade-grown coffee. And lastly, the topic of my presentation is to become a citizen science. So as Luke mentioned in my bio, I really firmly believe that citizen scientists can save the world. I think that there are a number of studies now out there that show that scientists and lay scientists working together have made important discoveries. They bringing people that may not feel that they can be part of the discussion into the fold of creating knowledge about our world creates this great synergy. And also that as citizen scientists learn more, you become ambassadors for the species or whatever topic you're engaged in as a citizen scientist. And I'm putting this out here because I just quickly went on Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a forecast of how many migratory birds pass through. You could do it by zip code, you could do it by county. I did it for the state of North Carolina last couple nights ago. And this is the estimated number of migratory birds passing the night sky for the state of North Carolina. So isn't this amazing? I mean, this is an amazing number. And who knew, except for those citizen scientists who are part of this awareness of migratory birds and insects too. And so by becoming and joining Journey North or whatever citizen science project, there are other ones out there. Also, you learn more and you can share the joy of migratory birds and their journey, and insects too, with others who may not be in the know, because we're not out at night. Most of us aren't, and it's something that is worth sharing. So I want to go through some of the program features and our projects. We are continental in scope. So we have volunteers from Canada, across North America, across United States, Mexico, into Latin America, Caribbean, Puerto Rico. So we really are continental scope. I would say that the majority of our volunteers hail from the United States. So there's always room to grow. The program Journey North started in 1994. It was a nonprofit for about 25 years and then was acquired by the University of Wisconsin-Madison Arboretum in 2018. So it's an impressive length of time that Journey North has been around. And what is so important to note is that this long-term data collection really allows us and researchers to assess trends over time. They can see how migration patterns have evolved in the face of, for example, climate change, because of this long-term data has been collected by so many volunteers. So we have, 800,000 reports, about 100,000 participants for the period of time that Journey North has been in existence. So we focus on easily identified species of migratory birds and insects, in part because we want the crowd to be involved. We want more people to be involved. So we want to reduce the barriers of participation. So we have picked those species that most people can learn to recognize very easily. Our methods, we're trying or striving to make them as easy as possible. Again, we focus on commonly observed life cycle events of migratory species. Our online registration and data entry. And again, we love to share the story of migratory species. And we do that, and I'll show you a little bit as I progress through these slides. We do that with the voices of our volunteers. So our volunteers write some rich comments in their observational reports, and we use those comments to tell the stories across North America using the voice of our volunteers. We also have various interactive maps. I think we have about 50 interactive maps that give you a front row viewing to migration. So again, as I mentioned, easily identified species. We have a hummingbird project, monarch and milkweed project, oriole project, red-winged blackbird, common loons, ice out and ice off, the American robin, barn swallows, bald eagles. And then we have a fun one where we ask our volunteers to just submit what their favorite sign of the season is. We do have 2 educational programs, a tulip test garden and something called the Symbolic Migration Project. So just quick briefly with these educational programs, it's for, we have educators working with their students in the fall. They plant tulip bulbs in a garden. And then they, through instructions, the teacher has guided discussions about what phenology is, how weather impacts spring bloom times and emergence times. So it's really a fun educational program. The Symbolic Migration Project, I could talk almost a whole hour about this project. This was started by Journey North. It is now administered through something called the Monarchs Across Georgia, which is another nonprofit organization. basically it's a little bit like a pen pal situation where educators in the United States and Canada with their students create ambassador butterflies that they then decorate, like this one in the photo here. The ambassador butterflies are sent to monarchs across Georgia, who then sends all these ambassador butterflies to an environmental educator in Mexico. And that environmental educator then goes to various schools that surround the monarch biosphere reserve, where the monarchs overwinter during the winter months. And then there's an exchange back to the United States and Canada. So it's really a wonderful way for students to start to learn about monarch biology, but also is a great way to show that we're all part of the story of monarchs, and we all could be ambassadors for monarch butterflies. Just quick, I thought I would push a few stats at you from North Carolinians and their contributions to Journey North over the years. This map just shows you we have a pretty good coverage here across North Carolina. There are a few gaps where we have no participation. Of course, over the years, we've gained in the numbers of observation reports that have been submitted. You'll notice that during the pandemic was a peak time for Journey North. People were out there making observations. It was kind of a silver lining for us during the pandemic. We'd like to get it back up to that level of reporting. So hopefully everybody will get off this call and register with Journey North and start reporting. This is another just a fun little chart or graph that shows that North Carolinians love to report on monarchs and hummingbirds. We have some participants in the tulip test garden. We have a few who have participated in the symbolic migration project. So across the board, lots of interest in all the species that Journey North has under its umbrella. So congratulations to North Carolinians. Keep it up. I just thought I would throw a little couple snapshots here of the registration, so it's not something new. So you'll just go online. It's very simple: name, address, you set a password, and at the time when you register, you can subscribe to our e-newsletter. Our submission reporting process, again, is fairly simple. You just have to enter a date, location, a number of species that you are observing. We encourage photographs. This is an optional piece. We know how hard it is, for example, to catch a hummingbird flitting across your garden, but the photos are extremely helpful. So if you can, please do submit a photograph. And comments, write about the context of your observation. So again, the newsletter, we write about 100 to 150 newsletters annually, and of course share widely on social media. Our YouTube channel has a couple great videos from an observer in, for example, Mexico, who is documenting the overwintering population of monarchs. So lots to dig in there. Our interactive maps that I mentioned before, another way to see migration happening in real time. And each of the location pins you can select, and up pops the actual report of the volunteer who submitted the observation. So quickly, and Luke, you can tell me if I'm running on time. I forgot to put my clock on here. It is a year-round monitoring effort in the spring. So we're right now in the throes of spring, even though in Wisconsin it doesn't feel like it. We're very interested in hearing about the first arrival of the migratory species to a particular region. So yes, it's all about the firsts in the spring. For those plant species that we do ask some phenological data, it's when the plant species emerge and when they bloom. As we move into spring and summer, we ask our volunteers to report on more of the behavior and presence of the migratory species. So it's the it's nectaring behaviors, nesting, kind of the onset of breeding, raising young. And then when we move into the fall, there's a whole set of other pieces of information that we're asking our volunteers to report on. Oftentimes, the male of the species will leave a breeding area first and move through an area. And we ask people to report on that, big staging events. And then as we move into the winter period, it's the presence of these migratory species that persist in certain areas. So that's just sort of the broad brush strokes, but I thought I would run through some of our project species to give you a better sense of what that really means in within a project specific reporting process. So our hummingbird migration project, we do track all species of hummingbirds that migrate. Of course, east of the Rockies and in North Carolina, you probably see the ruby-throated hummingbird more frequently. So that is your hummingbird of the state. So in the spring, again, as I mentioned, we're really asking people to let us know when that first migrating hummingbird shows up either at your feeder or in your garden. We're specifically asking people to let us know if their feeders are up and also if they actually, during that first flush of spring arrival of a ruby-throated hummingbird, I'm talking about North Carolina, if they're actually nectaring from flowers in your garden. So this will be coming up again as I go through some of the other projects, but we're very interested to know if the resources that the migratory species depend on are matching up with the first arrival of these migratory species. So, for example, are there flowers available for the first arriving hummingbirds to an area for them to kind of recharge and continue their migration if they are going to continue through an area? This is something that researchers are saying it's kind of like a phenological mismatch, where because of climate change or weather, kind of big freak weather events, some of the resources are not there for these migrating species. So in the spring and the summer, again, it's kind of fluid because my spring is a little different here in Wisconsin than your spring is in North Carolina. So we keep asking people, are you seeing your first? After the first, then we ask for those onset of mating, nesting, and a defending territory. Again, we continue to ask about what plant species hummingbirds are nectaring from. This is important information for scientists and land managers because they want to know, for example, what's a great seed mix for a pollinator garden that is going to be welcoming to hummingbirds. In the fall and the winter, somewhat similar kind of questions, but we're really asking folks to be on the lookout, for example, for that male ruby-throated hummingbird that might be new to your feeder. Most of our volunteers actually know resident hummingbirds from their summer, and they actually know when there's a new male ruby-throated hummingbird making its way through on this southward journey. So anyway, that's more of those kind of questions. I thought I'd put up a quick map of where we are in 2024 spring. You in North Carolina have already seen some ruby-throated hummingbirds in your area. So that's these dots right here, and even into Virginia. So this is a note just to say, be on the lookout. Let us know when you see your first ruby-throated hummingbird of the spring season. And so that showed real time right now. I just did this quick compilation of, I don't know if this is going to play, maybe not. This isn't going to play, but that's all right. This just shows you that March is, the first flush of spring arrival. Ruby-throated arrivals are just starting. And then when April arrives, you're going to really see this population expand, and a lot of people will start reporting first arrival of ruby-throated hummingbirds. And then it'll slowly decrease into May and June. And also, I just wanted to quickly note here about the Hummingbird Project. We're very interested in knowing about hummingbirds that actually stay in place over the winter months. So there's been some anecdotal evidence that ruby-throated hummingbirds and even rufous do not continue the migration southward, but are staying especially in the Gulf states and up into North Carolina. So this is a call out to not keep a lookout for hummingbirds during the winter months, and especially rufous hummingbirds, because there is some indication that the rufous do not continue south, but they kind of migrate east and up into North Carolina. So it's a big question. We really need our volunteers out there keeping their eyes open. Moving quickly on to monarchs and milkweed phenology. This is a big project of Journey North. Quickly, again, we could spend all the presentation on monarchs. There are two populations of monarchs, the eastern population of monarchs and the western population of monarchs. They both have different migratory behavior. So this quickly shows you that the eastern population that is east of the Rockies typically migrate all the way to this one specific spot in Mexico, where there are high elevation fir trees that are host to the monarchs during the winter period. The western population of monarchs reside or overwinter along the coast of California. What is interesting now, we're in the throes of spring. So the monarchs in Mexico and the monarchs along the Gulf of California have left their overwintering sites and are now moving into their breeding territory. Monarchs that are leaving Mexico arrive ready to lay their eggs. They enter Texas right in here, and they lay their eggs only on milkweed. So it's really important to know if milkweed is up in Texas and along the Gulf states and up in, further on up, to let us know if these plants have emerged and are ready to receive the eggs of the monarchs that are ready to lay them right when they arrive from Mexico. Okay, this is just a quick snapshot of the western population, and then the eastern population, and that's this one small area in Mexico that is host to the monarchs. The other interesting wrinkle of monarchs is that right now, again, the monarchs have left Mexico. They are laying their eggs along the Gulf states and on up as they move north. That's generation that has left Mexico, lay their eggs, and then they die. Those eggs then hatch. That second generation continues the northward migration. That second generation lays their eggs. They die. The third generation then continues the northward migration to the breeding area. So they're breeding all along the way. And it's the fourth generation that we receive here in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and up into Canada that actually return to Mexico in the September, October, and into November. So the big mystery is, how does this fourth generation of monarchs know where to go? How do they know to return to Mexico, a place that they've never been before? So it's still a little bit of a mystery. I like to think that nature's, that we still have mysteries to kind of think and ponder about. But that's why it's so important with monarchs, is to that journey all along the way, every step of the way, there has to be habitat, especially milkweed, available for monarchs to lay their eggs. So this is probably pretty obvious to you by now. In the spring, we really want to know when the monarchs arrive, when they start laying their eggs, the presence of larva caterpillars, and if their chrysalis is present. So it's a little bit of that first arrival and the first onset of laying eggs. And then also, when are people seeing milkweed and where? Additionally, that second generation or third generation needs to have fuel. So what are monarchs nectaring upon? What flowers are you seeing monarchs nectaring upon? This is a quick schematic of what I just mentioned before. Right now, this is where we're at today. Monarchs are at kind of the 35th slide. They're in Oklahoma right now. There are a few actually that have reached North Carolina. Luckily, this is a little bit off in terms of the scale. Milkweed has been seen all the way up into kind of the northern portions of Oklahoma. So it seems like milkweed is there ready to receive the monarchs as they continue their northward expansion to their breeding range. Summer, after the summer firsts, we continue to ask the same questions, really. We want to know where monarchs are, where breeding is happening, where milkweed is, and what nectaring resources are available for monarchs. And actually the same in the fall. Really, it's where are the monarchs, and are there resources available to them? There is one little difference for the fall monarch migration monitoring, is that in the spring, monarchs migrate northward more individually. In the fall, they migrate in groups. So it's not unusual, or some people are fortunate to be able to see monarchs in very large numbers. So 100, some at Hawkwatch stations have seen 500 monarchs migrating at one time. That's a peak event that we want to know about. So we ask people to let us know if they see large congregations of monarchs flying southward in the fall. Monarchs, as insects, stop at night and rest. They stop in roosts, in colonies that sometimes can be quite large. So anywhere between 3 and 50 to 100 monarchs can cluster in trees along their migration route. So we want to know where those are. Again, it's trying to get a sense of what are these important places for these migratory species, both in the spring and in the fall. They're called stopover sites. So we need to know where these important stopover sites for these migratory species are. And it's one of these things for monarchs, especially. You don't think of monarchs in trees, but trees become very important to monarchs in the fall. So we really want people to be on the lookout there. This is just a quick schematic or a map of the location of some of the monarch roosts. And actually, I don't think this is 2023. Sorry about that. But it shows that there's really 2 pathways in the fall for the eastern population of monarchs, kind of right down through the central part of the United States, and then along the coast. So you in North Carolina are really critical to reporting fall migration for monarchs. Winter months, again, same questions. Are you seeing monarchs? So you think that what I've just told you about monarchs migrating to Mexico and or California, depending on where we are in North America, that's an odd question for me to ask you. But actually, there's increasing anecdotal evidence that monarchs are not completing their journey as the eastern population to Mexico. So I have a special kind of working group where we're kind of thinking more about how to capture information about monarchs who are actually overwintering along the Gulf states. So Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, on into Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina. So we really put a big push out there recently to let us, to people to let us know where monarchs are and if they're seeing milkweed in those areas during the winter months. So this is, anyway, there's lots more of that topic, but I will move on. How are we doing with time, Luke?
We were at 7:38, so you got plenty of time.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, let me go through and then leave time for people's questions. I did want to bring in one more project. I mean, all our project species are important, and even though the hummingbirds and the monarchs are the largest project species for Journey North, I did want to mention common loons here because it might seem to be a surprise to some, especially in North Carolina, that I'm talking about common loons. So for many of you, you think, or at least here in Wisconsin, the call of the loon means the beginning of the summer for many of us. They are very common species that have this wonderful warbling sound on our lakes in the north and up into Canada. This is just a quick map of the migratory routes of the common loons. For example, our loons that arrive in our lakes here in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and up into Canada actually overwinter along the Gulf of Mexico, and some along the coast of the Atlantic coast. So it's pretty incredible that this bird that's really associated with freshwater lakes, northern freshwater lakes, actually overwinter in saltwater. They have special biology that allows them to fish and forage in saltwater and then make that transition to freshwater environments in their during their breeding period. So we're really asking people to let us know when, you know, of course, now we're all waiting for the common loon to arrive here in the spring. The structure of the common loon body is such that they need how many feet of water to land on. So really, the ice has to be out on the lakes when they arrive during the breeding for their breeding season. So that's why we ask people to let us know when there's ice out. And then in the fall and the winter, we really want to capture where loons migrate through. Are there stopover lakes that are really important to loons on their way south during the winter? Where are loons sighted along the coast of the Atlantic or the coast, the Gulf Coast? So this is all information that would be very helpful for those of us kind of thinking about loon migration. I think that might be my last one. So yes, promote and join Journey North. So I'll stop at this point. I think I've given you enough time to ask questions. There's so much here to unpack. I wish I had more time with all of you.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, I feel your pain with a lot of these topics. Sometimes you can go on tangents that can in and of themselves be their own presentation.
Yes, yeah. And I don't know, you know, some people just want to focus on monarchs and some people just want to focus on hummingbirds. And I'm going to try to give you a little bit of everything.
Well, you guys are tackling a lot of different species. That's really impressive.
Yes, we are. And the we is me. So I should mention that.
A mighty team of one. I love it.
Exactly.
So it looks like there was an initial question, and I'm trying to dig through the chat here, but it was from Marilyn, and looks like Marilyn was wondering if there is an app,
Good
or
question.
if you need to go straight to the website.
Yes, so great question, Marilyn. So that was something that I didn't want to go into too much detail. I am developing a mobile-friendly app, and it will be launched in this summer. Right now, you have to go on to, I mean, you can access it, the registration form via your cell phone, but it's not very mobile-friendly. It'd be better to register and submit your sightings online. But please stay tuned for that kind of fall launch. We're waiting for the spring first arrivals to come. We don't want to launch something in the middle of the spring. But great question.
And I'll make sure to send out a follow-up email with all the links that you provided me, Nancy, and that includes a newsletter if folks want to join so they can stay up to date with everything that's going on with Journey North. I had a quick question. So how does Journey North, how does it fill a gap that, say, eBird or iNaturalist or another citizen science platform not cover?
Right. Great question. So again, I'm very ecumenical. I just want people to become citizen scientists. So if you choose to join another program, that's great. I think the difference with Journey North is that one, it's the focus on migration in a very, very specific kind of way, very specific project species. So we can double down and really think deeply about those particular species. So there's that aspect. I think there's a community aspect also. Some of our volunteers have been with the Journey North program much longer than I have, actually, close to 20 years. And so there's a certain amount of community aspect to Journey North that one might not get with an eBird or an iNaturalist. Yes, so that somewhat answers your question. I think the other thing to mention here is that Journey North is very committed to sharing data. So you as a volunteer, or Luke or anybody else, can go online and see the data and download it in like a little table form. We've also published all the data sets in central repositories for more the scientific community. And there's a lot of sharing across platforms, and more of that will happen in the future.
Thank you. I see we got a couple questions here, but I just had a quick follow-up question to that. And I think you covered it in your answer, but so if you could elaborate maybe just a little bit more about how the Journey North program, how that data is used for conservation, and who exactly can see the results. And that's great to hear that it's so accessible and open to the public.
Yeah, so how the data is used. So I think the fact of that we make the data open to land managers and researchers. There are a number of researchers that have used the data for specific analyses. I've talked about the monarch roost location. So there's been a number of studies that have documented the importance of roosts given Journey North data. Some analysis of the important stopover sites, which are what roosts are too. So we don't here at Journey North analyze the data ourselves, but we make it available to researchers for that purpose.
Thank you. Yeah, making it available, that's a huge part of the puzzle. Looks like Denise, I think, asked this question first. Can you clarify if monarchs that we see as caterpillars and finally emerging as butterflies in the fall in North Carolina, are they not going to make it to Mexico, but likely to overwinter in Alabama and other nearby states? No, that was a pretty big question there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it here.
It's in the Q&A there at the bottom.
Oh, okay. So pious. So are caterpillars who are emerging as butterflies in the fall, are they going to make it to Mexico? I guess most likely, yes. It just depends on the timing and of course the weather, right? I would say that there's just the smaller portion of the population that is overwintering along that Gulf state. So I wouldn't say it's the majority. And there are other factors that are coming into play. And I'll just mention this quickly here. If you can, don't plant tropical milkweed because there's some evidence that good intentioned people want to plant tropical milkweed because it is, in many cases, a non-native species of milkweed, and it stays greener longer. It may even stay greener during the winter period, and it could kind of trigger monarchs to stay in a certain location much longer and not continue the southward or the southward migration during the winter period. So there's other aspects to monarchs not completing their migration all the way south that we're trying to kind of tease out together. But tropical milkweed generally, I'll just say that shouldn't plant it.
Yeah, Denise had a follow-up to your answer, saying that it is amazing to think that this tiny creature is headed to Mexico, and it really is. It can be very difficult to try to rack your brain around the idea of all the different patterns that these species are taking, and it really is amazing. I'm glad that you mentioned in the presentation that sometimes it's nice to leave room for a little bit of wonder as well, right?
Yeah. And I will say here again, I could probably go on about monarchs, but we're kind of aware of how these species, what they ecosystem functions that they provide. Some are pollinators, and they all these other functions that they provide within a region. But for monarchs, the other thing to think about too is kind of their cultural significance. So this gives me goosebumps even to this day that I didn't even know about before I started Journey North. So monarchs arrive at their overwintering site in Mexico on the Day of the Dead. Uncannily so. I mean, it's the same period, same 2 days. It's just very mysterious, right? And for many in the surrounding area, those returning monarchs are the embodiment of their ancestors. So there's great celebration on the arrival of monarchs. So if that journey were to disappear, that kind of cultural and religious significance of the monarch would disappear too. So it's not only ecosystem functions, it's the cultural importance of these migratory species. And us too, we love to see them. It brings us joy.
Monarchs, yeah, they're definitely famous. I mean, they're the poster child of conservation, and rightfully so in a lot of cases, right? And people do get very excited, and so do I. Looks like Jamie has a question. It looks like it'd be more. It's going to be about just specific about migration. Curious about the American Robin Project. Where do they migrate? They seem to be here in North Carolina most of the year. Are the ones we see here in the winter coming from the north, or are they not migrating as much?
Great question. And that's a hard one to tease out. So American robins are really interesting. They do move, and so maybe migration is the best word for them when you think of these species that hundreds of thousands of miles sometimes. They will move when resources become scarce. I think their behavior is very different. So when you do see newly arrived robins to North Carolina, they are usually in larger flocks. And so their behavior is different. That it would indicate that, this is a population that has moved to North Carolina, to your area, from another area that is no longer suitable for them to find food and berries and things like that. So, but there are some robins that stay that are residential during the breeding and non-breeding period. So it's hard to tease that out. It really is. And so this is another, I don't know if anybody was going to ask this question, but I'll just answer it even if I've been asked, is, there's been a lot of progress made with banding and use of radio tagging. And actually, North Carolina, you just got a MODIS station, which is a large tower that is set up to capture the movement of radio tagged, telemetry, radio tagged bird species. So we're finding a lot more information that would help us answer Jamie's question here specifically. But my hope is that we're not just looking at that individual bird that crosses that MODIS station in North Carolina. I forget now where it was. But you couple that with the kind of broad brush crowdsourced observations that volunteers have been making for years and years. And so that's where you get kind of that more nuanced understanding of questions like what Jamie has raised here.
This is a popular question. I've heard this before. I definitely want your take on this. This is from Ginger. Do you encourage people to raise monarchs for release, or is this not a good idea?
Ginger, I guess the quick answer is no, it is not a good idea. So I know that a number of, within educational settings, teachers will, it's fun to have a few monarchs that they raise in a classroom. And it's just, amazing to see the monarchs develop from an egg, on up to chrysalis and then a butterfly. But captive raised monarchs have been found to, couple things. They are susceptible to disease. They are found to not be able to orient in a way that will make them successful in their migration south. And so you're not, although it may be your intention to kind of help save the monarch by raising monarchs, that really isn't the best way to do it. It actually can lead to more disease and these particular individuals not being able to complete the migration. The biggest thing is to plant native plants, especially great pollinator plants, and especially milkweed. Not tropical milkweed, native to North Carolina, milkweed. But that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, Ginger.
So I just had a question pop in my head. There's a lot of species, like there's a lot of species that migrate. How did in the history of Journey North, how did you decide which species to track? And are there any projects that you want to start?
Oh, I've got lots of ones I want to start. I started in 2018, so these projects were inherited. And so, when we talk about the American robin, that could be one that, well, should we keep it or should we not keep it? I still think it's important because the American robin they're like the engineers of the woodlands. So there's lots of reasons to know more about robins and kind of their behaviors and what they're eating. In some places they definitely migrate. I think that, in the future world, I think we could be more strategic in our additional projects that we take on. I know that, the martin be something that would be interesting to add. Bluebirds would be interesting to add. But again, we have to stay true to one of our kind of features is to pick species that are broadly recognized by the vast majority of people. So we want to keep, there's a balancing act there. But I do think, the new app and whole bunch of back end stuff that I'm doing will allow us to add more species. into the future, so we can adapt to changing times, right?
Is there anything that surprised you so far about Journey North and some of the migratory patterns that you've observed?
I think, well, a couple things. Well, the monarchs. I had no idea about the fall roost before I joined Journey North. So, the importance of trees to monarchs, given that my background is in forestry, I thought, oh. And then also the interconnectedness of some of these migratory pathways to waterways. So again, hearkening to my work in water quality, it really kind of showcased, you take a landscape perspective and the journeys that the migratory species are taking, they're seeing from a landscape perspective that we just don't as we travel along in our, kind of in a local environment. So I think for me, it's like that, thinking like a bird, or thinking like a monarch of the landscape, not seeing boundaries, looking for those safe havens, those stopover sites. It's kind of an eye opener for me that I need to think more like a bird than I do.
I think as we're just going about our normal day, that all these species are migrating, or some of them are migrating, all around us, and millions of birds are flying through North Carolina. That is really cool to think about.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I will mention, back to your question, Luke, about the use of the data. So again, monarch roosts. There was a park in it was actually Wisconsin, that the cohort of volunteers had been monitoring the monarch roosts for 5 years or 7 years. And these trees were located in a public park. And the park service people were going to make some adjustments and cut down these particular trees. The park officials didn't know about the monarch roots, but it was the volunteers who said, hey, these are important stopover places for these monarchs. You can't cut these trees down. And so again, it's like seeing the world seasonally, not just at one particular point in time. And the fact that this wouldn't have been known had the volunteers not been observant and been there to be the ambassadors for the monarchs. So
yeah, I've moved around quite a bit in my life, but for the first time I've been in one place for going on 2 years now, and going back to the same area, same park that's right next to where I live. And if you do take the time to be observant, it really is just amazing how, especially with birds, but of course other species as well, there are other animals as well, how things change, and animals come back, and like you said, sometimes to the same exact tree or the same general area, and
right.
It's an eye opener.
Yeah, and I'm anxious to go to my family home in North Carolina, because the osprey nest right where we are, and there are bluebirds that nest. So anyway.
And yeah, and there's something about, because you can hear people say that's true, but there's something about actually seeing it for yourself where things do start to click. Now we're running a little bit low on time. I did want to ask you a few more questions, if you didn't mind, if you still
sure.
You're good. Yeah, so one I wanted to ask was, how is Journey North, I guess to preface this a little bit, NCWF runs a summer bio blitz on iNaturalist every year. And a lot of times sometimes people will say, oh, that's great, I'm really excited about that, but they're turned off just by the fact that it takes some tech savviness to be involved. So I guess, is there any training available or any resource that you would point folks to? Or I guess the larger question is, how is Journey North accessible for all people, regardless of their experience level?
Great question. So we have a lot of resources on the website. These, some of what I've told you is more in detail on the website. So you can actually see, but we really hope that if you just go on to the data entry form, that it will be kind of apparent what you need to do. but we have, it's interesting you mentioned Blitz. There is a monarch monitoring Blitz that it's a tri-national monarch monitoring Blitz at the end of July. So Journey North joins with Mission Monarch, the CEC in Canada, Monarch Joint Venture. It's a compilation of about 6 different organizations. We're all asking people to monitor monarchs. And so there are flyers that we have on our website for kind of specific campaigns like that. But most of the information that I've told you is in more detail on the website. Yes, and we're making the website better because it's also being redone too.
Well, I've taken a look at your website pretty thoroughly, and I would the resources are definitely there, so we'll make sure to include
do
that
a little digging, but
so folks can check it out. But all right, I guess that's a last question. Unless anybody else has another.
I think there was one here about the garden,
just...
a butterfly garden.
Oh,
yes.
Excuse me, I missed that one. Maryland.
Yeah.
My little town has just started a butterfly garden. Do you feel they have a benefit to nature, just not human enjoyment? Absolutely, right?
Absolutely. They are, we enjoy them, but monarchs do pollinate to some extent, not as much as a bumblebee. So they are part of the pollinator family. They're our source of food for birds and not so much birds, but other creatures. So, it's all part of the web of life. And that garden will not just benefit the monarch, it'll benefit all the other visitors to that garden. So yes, plant.
Waving the native plant flag, yes.
Yes.
We do the same at the Wildlife Federation.
Yes, yeah.
All right, so kind of a big picture question. How do you or do you even maintain hope and optimism in a world where habitat destruction and species loss seems to be becoming more and more prevalent?
No. Yes, I know. I did put those sad slides in here on the decline.
But you turned it around.
And it is across the board. But here's Marilyn, wherever she's hailing from, talking about a community garden. And my hope, where I see hope is all these small efforts, and it may seem small, but you put those small efforts all together and it makes a huge effort. It's like that patchwork quilt of all these individuals making a difference. And so, that's where the power of, where our power is as individuals to join together in creating this mosaic of change. And then, I would say and encourage everyone to work with your community board members too. And, that's not always an easy thing to do, but you are the ambassadors for these species because no one else is going to do it. Like those women from Wisconsin who lobbied the park people to not cut down certain trees. So yeah, power is within us all. That's my hope.
And
it's all 16 people on this
call. Hey, if they form a collective, then
yes,
who knows what they can accomplish.
Yes, and all the people that are part of your organization, you've done.
Yeah, and I get choked up too whenever I think about volunteerism and people really spending time and energy and not being incentivized by money, but rather simply acting out in a labor of love and trying to be a part of something bigger than themselves. It really, I don't know, it's special. I'm grateful to hear that you're building a platform and have built something where people can go and be a part of something, so they don't just feel like they're just an individual. They can really leverage their impact, right? So
exactly. So 19 people here. That's great.
Is there anything that you'd like to mention, Nancy? Something that you haven't been asked, or?
No, I think if anybody wants to contact me, you can share my direct email. I will try to get back to answer individual questions. And yeah, there's such great work going on. So keep the hope alive and try Journey North.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.